Every great empire believes it will last forever, until the moment its own currency turns against it. Not armies, not invasions, not rebellions. Money is the silent force that has brought superpowers to their knees. From the mighty Romans to the wealthy Spanish and the global dominance of Britain, history has repeated the same financial warning again and again. Today, we're going to uncover that hidden pattern, the one that destroys empires from the inside long before enemies ever reach the gates. And as we break it down, ask yourself one question. Is the United States beginning to follow the same script?
At its peak, the Roman Empire ruled for over 500 years, stretching across 3 continents and controlling millions of people. Its military was unmatched. Its roads and cities were marvels of engineering, and its economy thrived on a stable and trusted currency, the denarius. This silver coin was more than just money. It was the foundation of Rome's expansion and influence. People knew that when they received a denarius, it held real value, and that trust allowed Rome to pay its soldiers, fund its infrastructure, and maintain authority across vast territories. But what happens when that trust begins to erode? When the very currency that supports an empire starts to lose its value, the consequences ripple through every level of society. Rome provides a stark warning of how fragile even the greatest empire can be when the foundation of its economy is shaken. Over time, Rome's success became its own undoing. The empire's constant expansion and growing expenses forced emperors to find new ways to fund their ambitions. Emperor Nero, seeking to finance his lavish lifestyle and military campaigns, reduced the silver content in the denarius, creating a small profit but also a warning sign of what was to come. Later, Emperor Caracalla cut the silver content to 50%, and by the time of Emperor Gallienus, it had dropped to just 5%. Soldiers who had once been paid in coins of real value were now receiving almost worthless metal, while the prices of basic goods skyrocketed. Farmers refused to sell food for devalued coins. Armies demanded payment in gold or supplies, and the economy began to seize up. The collapse wasn't caused by invaders or natural disasters, it was self-inflicted. Each reduction in silver content set off a chain reaction, demonstrating how undermining trust in money can unravel the power of even the mightiest empire. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire had officially collapsed, not because foreign armies were stronger, but because it could no longer sustain itself financially. The once powerful empire, built on military might and administrative control, crumbled under the weight of its own economic mismanagement. Soldiers went unpaid, infrastructure decayed, and the government lost the ability to maintain order. The lesson is clear. No matter how advanced or dominant a civilization appears, ignoring the warning signs of financial instability is fatal. Modern leaders often believe their systems are different, that they can avoid the mistakes of the past. But Rome proves that self-inflicted collapse is always possible when currency loses its value. The echoes of this pattern are something we should recognize before it's too late. Spain's immense wealth, however, proved to be a double-edged sword. The empire's rulers, intoxicated by their riches, spent extravagantly on wars, palaces, and luxury goods imported from other nations. King Philip II inherited massive debts from his father, and rather than curbing spending, he borrowed even more to maintain Spain's global dominance and to fight multiple conflicts simultaneously against the Ottoman Empire, Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, and even England. Despite controlling half of the world's silver production, Spain repeatedly defaulted on its debts, declaring bankruptcy multiple times within a few decades. Each default eroded trust in the Spanish economy, forcing the government to debase its currency, minting coins with less silver or introducing copper coins that nobody trusted. Inflation soared, the cost of living skyrocketed, and the empire's economic foundation began to crumble. Just like Rome, Spain had all the resources it could ever need, Yet mismanagement and overconfidence led to decline. The pattern is chilling. Massive wealth, unsustainable spending, repeated defaults, loss of trust, and inevitable collapse. History was repeating itself, and Spain was the next cautionary tale in the story of empires undone by their own money.
Following the decline of Spain, the British Empire emerged as the dominant global power, stretching across continents and controlling vast populations and resources. At its height in 1922, Britain governed 458 million people, roughly a quarter of the world's population, and maintained a quarter of the world's landmass. The backbone of this empire was the pound sterling, a stable and trusted currency anchored by the gold standard. For over 2 centuries, the pound served as the world's reserve currency, and more than 60% of global trade was conducted in British pounds. This trust allowed Britain to borrow, invest, and maintain its sprawling empire, financing colonies, armies, and infrastructure across the globe. The empire seemed invincible, and for a time it truly was. Yet, as history has shown, no empire, no matter how strong or well managed, is immune to the consequences of overextension and financial missteps. The question for the audience is clear. Could any nation, even one as dominant as Britain, maintain this level of control indefinitely? Or is there a tipping point where power begins to crumble from within? The British Empire's strength, however, was not immune to the pressures of global conflict and financial overreach. During World War I, Britain borrowed extensively to fund the war effort, and by 1919, the national debt had exploded from $650 million in 1914 to over $7 billion. The strain forced Britain off the gold standard, turning the pound into a fiat currency backed only by trust. Attempts to return to pre-war gold parity in 1925 proved disastrous, as the overvalued pound made British exports uncompetitive and crushed economic growth. The outbreak of World War II only deepened the crisis. By 1945, Britain's national debt had reached a staggering 270% of GDP. Cities lay in ruins, and the empire could no longer afford to maintain its global dominance. Currency devaluation and inflation eroded savings and confidence, signaling to the world that Britain's era of supremacy was ending. The decline of the British Empire demonstrates a crucial point. Even the most established and resource-rich nations can fall quickly when debt spirals, currency trust erodes, and economic mismanagement intersects with global conflict. It is a vivid reminder that financial stability is as critical to maintaining power as military might. When we look closely at Rome, Spain, and Britain, a clear pattern emerges, one that repeats itself across centuries and continents. Every empire that collapsed economically went through the same 7 stages. First comes dominance, when an empire reaches its peak, wielding unmatched military power and enjoying economic stability. Second is overextension, as empires expand beyond what their resources can sustain, stretching armies, infrastructure, and administration to the breaking point. Third is deficit spending, borrowing and promising more than the empire can truly afford. Fourth is currency debasement, when governments, unable to fund their commitments, reduce the value of money or flood the economy with unbacked currency. Fifth is inflation, where prices rise uncontrollably as money loses its real value. Sixth is loss of confidence. Both citizens and foreign nations no longer trust the currency, leading to financial paralysis. Finally, collapse occurs. When the economy fails, the military cannot be maintained, and the empire disintegrates. Recognizing these stages allows us to see history not as isolated events, but as a predictable sequence, a formula that repeats itself over and over. The challenge for us today is to spot these signs in the modern world before it's too late. Today, the United States sits at a crossroads, echoing the same warning signs seen in Rome, Spain, and Britain. Since 1944, the U.S. dollar has been the world's reserve currency, a symbol of trust and global economic influence. But over the decades, debt has soared to unprecedented levels, from $900 billion in 1980 to over $36 trillion in 2025. To keep the economy afloat, the Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars, creating new money out of thin air through programs like quantitative easing. At first, these actions seemed necessary to stabilize markets, but the result has been an ongoing debasement of the currency. Inflation has already begun to eat away at the real value of money, and the gap between spending and revenue grows wider each year. When we compare this to historical empires, the parallels are striking. Like Rome debasing the denarius, Spain flooding Europe with silver, or Britain printing money to fund wars, the United States is creating a financial pattern that history tells us rarely ends well. The question is no longer theoretical. How long can trust in the dollar hold before the consequences of overspending and money printing begin to ripple across the world? Another warning sign mirrors the fate of past empires: military overextension. The United States maintains nearly 800 military bases across more than 70 countries, spending over $800 billion annually just to sustain this global presence. Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan alone have cost over $8 trillion, and yet the nation continues to fund new conflicts, maintain overseas commitments, and uphold an expensive defense infrastructure. Just as Rome struggled to pay its legions and Britain could no longer fund its global empire after 2 world wars, the United States is facing the challenge of maintaining dominance far beyond its economic reach. The question becomes urgent. Can any empire, no matter how powerful, continue to control such vast territories and responsibilities indefinitely? History shows that the costs of overextension often outpace the empire's capacity to support them, creating cracks in the foundation that eventually lead to decline. The pattern is unmistakable, and the warning signs are already flashing. Looking ahead, the United States faces 3 possible paths, each shaped by the patterns history has already shown. The first is a controlled decline, similar to Britain after World War II, where the empire gradually loses global influence, experiences painful currency devaluation and inflation, but manages to adapt and survive as a second-tier power. The second is a chaotic collapse, like Rome in the 5th century, where currency fails, government control breaks down, and the social and political fabric unravels, leading to widespread instability and suffering. The third possibility is a reset or restructuring. A new currency system emerges, potentially backed by gold, a basket of currencies, or even digital alternatives, creating a painful but survivable transition. What makes the modern situation unique is the global reach of the U.S. dollar. Unlike previous empires, a collapse of the dollar would affect the entire world, disrupting trade, investment, and economies on every continent. The uncertainty is profound, and the only question left is how quickly these scenarios might unfold and how much the world will be affected when they do. History is not random, it follows patterns, and the story of empires like Rome, Spain, and Britain proves it. The 7 stages of collapse: dominance, overextension, deficit spending, currency debasement, inflation, loss of confidence, and finally collapse, repeat themselves with unsettling consistency. Today we can see these same warning signs unfolding in the United States. Debt is soaring, money is being printed, and trust in the dollar is slowly eroding. Understanding these patterns is not just an academic exercise, it's a way to anticipate what might happen next and to prepare for the consequences. If this video has given you a new perspective on history and the forces that shape nations, subscribe and stay informed. History never lies, and the pattern is unfolding before our eyes. The question is not whether these lessons will matter, but whether we will recognize them in time to respond.